Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin Marcagiani. Welcome to the Beyond Wellness Radio podcast. Feel free and head over to justinhealth.com. We have all of our podcast transcriptions there, as well as video series on different health topics ranging from thyroid, hormones, ketogenic diets, and gluten. While you're there, you can also schedule a consult with myself, Dr. J, and or our colleagues and staff to help dive into any pressing health issues you really want to get to the root cause on. Again, if you enjoy the podcast, feel free and share the information with friends or family, and enjoy the show. Hey guys, Dr. Justin Marcagiani here. I'm here with Jeff Chilton today, the mushroom expert. Really excited to have Jeff on the podcast. We're going to be going into psychedelic mushrooms, giving people the mushroom 101 background and just kind of all of the benefits and kind of what's happening under the hood and why mushrooms are a key tool in our functional medicine toolbox. Hey Jeff, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Justin, thank you so much for having me here. It's great to be back and see you again.
Excellent. Same here. Well, let's just kind of dive in and just do a mushrooms 101, right? You've been in the mushroom industry. You've been growing, harvesting mushrooms. This is kind of your forte. Just give the listeners kind of a mushroom 101, why mushrooms are important. Why should it be on our radar if we're trying to improve our health and such?
Sure. Well, first of all, just in terms of what a mushroom is, and part of it for me is I studied mycology at university, but then in 1973, I started working on an actual very, very large commercial mushroom farm. So, it's kind of interesting, Justin, because how do you actually grow mushrooms? Mushrooms don't have any seeds. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Well, mushrooms have spores. And so the point is that these spores float out on the air currents. They land on the ground. They land on wood or something. And when conditions are right, those mushroom spores will germinate into a very fine filament called a hypha. And when multiple of those hypha come together, they'll form what's called mycelium. Mycelium, a lot of people have probably heard of that. It is the actual body of this organism. So the mycelium is generally something that we never see. So for example, you're walking along a path that you walk on daily, and all of a sudden you go, oh my God, there's a mushroom. Where did that come from? Well, you're kind of like, there's no tree there so that you can see the apple or something like that. No, the mushroom just came up. Well, the mycelium is underneath, and that's the body of this organism. So it's basically decomposing all sorts of organic matter, building up its reserve. Up comes a mushroom. Here in the Pacific Northwest, that would be in the fall. The rains come, the humidity goes up, the temperature lowers a bit. Mushrooms need moist conditions to grow. Up comes the mushroom. It goes through different stages. Ultimately, it matures. On the underside of that mushroom are gills. Spores are produced on those gills. Now we have a completion of the life cycle of this organism. Now, what's important for everybody to understand is when you're dealing with supplements, you have to tell and put on the label, what is the plant part? What is the fungal part here? With a plant, it might be the root, it might be the fruit, the flower. So you have to put that on there. So if you're actually looking for a mushroom supplement or want to use mushrooms as a supplement, you need to be able to know whether or not you're getting the mycelium, which some people sell, the actual mushroom, or even in China, they sell products that are nothing but the spores. It's really pretty amazing.
So, and just to be clear, the spores are kind of what spreads from the mushroom that goes into the ground. Then the mycelium is kind of underneath. That's like the root, correct?
That's right. It's much like a root system.
And the body is what we see on top.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
All right. That makes sense.
Right. So the key here is just when you're looking for a supplement, look very closely, because there are companies that would actually grow that mycelium on grain. And I think we talked about this last time. And that grain will never be separated from the mycelium. So those products end up being mostly grain starch, and it could be hidden completely. Some companies will actually state in the other ingredients that this is myceliated rice or oats or something like this. But the worst part about it is some companies actually sell these products and call them mushroom, and people don't even know that they're actually getting mostly starch. So a lot of what we're trying to do is educate people about this very fact, that a lot of what is out there on the shelves being called mushrooms are nothing but grain starch. So you have to be very, very careful.
So just to make sure I understand, we have what we want to look for in the back of the label. That's the mycelium fruiting bodies. These are the mycelium, the underneath part, that are like connected with or grown on some kind of an oat or rice-based kind of starch. And then when they go to extract it, there's a whole bunch of starch with it. So they're not really just getting the concentrated mycelium or mushroom extract. They're getting a lot of the starch along with it.
Well, the fact of the matter is they're not even extracting it. They're just basically
taking the whole thing.
That's
Taking
right.
the whole thing.
That's right.
So if here's the mushroom growing on it, they're not like trying to separate it off. They're just grabbing the whole thing, grinding it up and encapsulating it.
Well, the point is they're not even growing mushrooms on it. No, it is nothing but a jar of sterilized.
So it's the mycelium
with the mycelium on it.
The roots, just the roots.
Just the roots. And they'll pour it out. They'll dry it and they'll grind it to a powder. And it turns out to be 30 to 60% grain starch.
Wow.
With very little fungal tissue. And this is the key. The dominant ingredient in there is the grain starch. So that's what you have to be looking for. One of the things that we do, first of all, we simply sell 100% mushrooms. We extract them, which helps to break down the cell walls to basically make it more bioavailable, especially the beta glucans, which make up 50% of the cell walls. We also analyze our products for beta glucans, and it will say on the label X amount of, greater than a certain amount of beta glucans. So you know you've got the beta glucans in there, and beta glucans are the compound in mushrooms that have the immunological activity. These other products, it's just mostly starch. They don't have the beta glucans, a very small amount of beta glucans from the small amount of mycelium. And mushrooms, here's the beauty, mushrooms have no starch. Starch is for plants. Cellulose is from plants. Mushrooms have a glycogen as a storage carbohydrate, much like we do. Really interesting. Mushrooms do not have cellulose either. They have these beta glucans as their essential fiber and carbohydrate, plus something like mannitol, which is a very, very slow acting carb. It's not like starch, which up you go and down you go. I mean, you know, the amount of starch out there that people eat, Justin, is unbelievable. Right. I mean, it's a starchy world.
For sure. Yeah.
So anyway, a lot of differences. So it's the mushroom that you want if you're looking for a supplement. And boy, do you have to be careful when you're looking at all the products on the shelves, because I'll tell you right now, 50% of the products will be nothing but grain starch.
So let me make sure I understand. So when we look on the back of the label, if it says mycelium fruiting bodies, is that mycelium and the mushroom on top, or just the mycelium root?
Well, look, that's something that a lot of companies will do to confuse people.
Yes, because I see that a lot.
Yeah, they'll say, oh, our mushroom contains fruiting body, mycelium. Well, how can it? A mushroom is a fruiting body. So the mushroom can't contain a fruiting body. It is the fruiting body. So that term fruiting body is just there to confuse people. They're selling you mycelium on grain. And that's the big issue, is that they don't separate out the grain. And look, we grow all our mushrooms in China. China also grows thousands of tons, I'm serious here, of pure mycelium. Nothing wrong with mycelium as a supplement product. I mean, it still has some of the active compounds, not anywhere close to what a mushroom has, but it's still viable. But they don't sell mycelium. They sell grain, and that grain is starch. And that's the real issue here, and the mislabeling issue. And I think I talked to you about the fact that we just filed what's called a citizen petition with the FDA. And what we're asking the FDA is to enforce what they've got already as compliance documents. FDA has a document that says you cannot call a product that contains mycelium, you can't call that mushroom. You just can't. That's what they say. You cannot do that because you're confusing people as to what you've got in there. It's not mushroom, so you can't put out a mycelium product and then say, oh, this is mushroom.
Interesting. And so just to be clear, we have the fruiting body or the body of the mushroom. That's what we see above, right? The mycelium's the roost.
Well, look, the mushroom is the fruiting body. Just remember that.
The whole mushroom is that the
whole
thing?
Mushroom is the fruiting body, right? The mycelium is what's called the vegetative body.
That's underneath. That's more the root structure.
That's right. So you have the vegetative body, the fruiting body, but that is mushroom and that's mycelium, and these are totally separate. So, the mushroom doesn't contain a fruiting body. It is the fruiting body.
It is the fruiting body. Okay, I understand. And so we have to be careful if you're gluten sensitive or getting any of the rice or oat in there. There could be some gluten sensitivity issues.
Oh, absolutely right. You never know, do you?
No, that makes sense. Now let's talk about the active constituents. So we have this, like the 1,3 beta glucan is one of the big ones that you see that have a lot of the active constituents. This is a carbohydrate product, or what is the beta glucan? Is that
the beta glucan is a what's considered a polysaccharide. Okay, so it is a sugar, long chain sugar that's a certain configuration, and this is a 1,3,1,6 beta glucan, which means the chain is 1,3 linked, but then there's a 1,6 branch that links off of it, and that's very, very important. The branching of this is super important because there are other beta glucans out there. Oats have beta glucans, but they're beta 1,3,1,4. Oats that beta glucan is considered very good fiber, but it doesn't have the immunological potentiation that the mushroom brings with it with the beta 1,3,1,6. And that's very important. Not all beta glucans are the same. The beta glucan, again, the one in mushrooms makes up 50% of the cell wall of most mushrooms, and mushrooms are very high in fiber. So, if you're eating mushrooms, a lot of that fiber in the mushroom is basically feeding your microbiome. So very mushrooms in that sense, they're such a great food, Justin. I mean, man, they have a good level of protein, 20 to 40%, mostly carbohydrates, but slow acting carbohydrates. They're not starchy carbohydrates. Right. It's mannitol, trehalose. So slow acting, and that's what's really important. And then they have low in fat, low calories. When I was first into growing mushrooms, traditional nutritionists said mushrooms have no food value because it was low calorie. Right. So you're not getting calories. What are you doing here? It's just something for that tastes good. That's kind of the way they looked at it. So low in calories and ultimately a high in potassium, high in phosphorus, and high in B vitamins, B1, 2, and 3.
Yeah. Potassium is really good. Now, with the beta 1,3,1,6 glucans, are these the active constituents? I know triterpenes kind of fall into this category that have major impact on deactivating viruses and helping the immune system. What other compounds are there, and is it within the glucans that these things arise?
No, actually, you're talking about the triterpenes, and these triterpenoids, which occur in reishi, they occur in turkey tail, and there's also triterpenoids in chaga, and these compounds, especially in reishi, have a very strong effect on the liver in terms of liver function. They really help with liver function. They've also been shown to be actually killing, in certain instances, cancer cells. Yes. They're really interesting compounds. And look, the terpenes are in a lot of different products out there. And terpenes, you can think of them too as like, okay, that's a sap that comes out of a tree and is used in many ways. So the triterpenoids in reishi are important. There's a lot of them, anywhere from 4 to 12% of triterpenoids in a reishi mushroom. There's next to no triterpenoids in mushroom mycelium. Absolutely next to no triterpenoids there. Turkey tail, again, has these triterpenoids. And what's really interesting is because we do so much analysis, we can look at these different species and say, for example, reishi and turkey tail have the highest amount of beta glucans in them. And we've discovered that through our testing of the beta glucans. It's really interesting when you figure that those two mushrooms are considered some of the top mushrooms in terms of immunological potentiation. They turn out to be the highest in beta glucans.
So are these the ones you want to use for immune deficiencies or cancers? I know reishi and some of the Oriental data shows it's like almost like a first line therapy in some of these countries when there's any type of cancer. So you have your reishi, you mentioned the turkey tail, I think you said chaga. Are these the big three that you would use for supporting the immune system?
Well, you know what? All of what I would call the top 10 functional mushroom species have beta glucans. Shiitake is good. Maitake has shown some really strong immunological potentiation in all the studies they've done on it. So it's not just those three. In fact, I would say maitake or shiitake even before chaga. Chaga I like to think of as something that's better for our digestive system. So that's been used traditionally for digestive issues or alimentary canal issues. They will use chaga. So I wouldn't put it up there as one of the tops, although it is considered a folk remedy for cancer as well. So it has been used in that way. But, I mean, we're not supposed to speak about cancer. Sometimes whenever I say that word out in a podcast or something, like, oh my God, I really shouldn't say that.
Yeah, we're not talking about treating any disease. We're just talking about supporting the body with some of these immune boosting compounds. So
that's right. That's absolutely right.
This is not medical advice. We're just trying to provide some good education out there. We're just two guys talking on the internet. Do your own research. So I wanted to go back to Mushrooms 101 because you talked about what to look for on the label. So mycelium fruiting bodies, stay away from that. Since I talked to you a few years back, I've been looking at more of the hot water extracts. One, I just deal with a lot of patients that are autoimmune that have gluten sensitivity. So we're trying to do the hot water extract to avoid all the oats and the rice. What's your thoughts on that? And then what other types do you like? And we'll put the sites down below. You have your realmushrooms.com and your Namex site. We'll put the links down below if you guys want to take a look at those resources. But what's your thoughts on the hot water extract? And then what other types do you like?
Well, look, every one of our products goes through a hot water extraction.
Okay.
That's very important. Mushrooms, their cell walls are, in fact, mushrooms are not the easiest thing to digest. So when you break them down with hot water, that will liberate some of the compounds in the cell walls, like the beta glucan. So when we are first, what I'd say are we have two different product categories. One is what we call 1-to-1 extract. We take 1 kilo of mushroom, hot water extraction, 1 kilo comes out of that, and we keep the fiber with it. So that's 1 kilo in, 1 kilo out. Still has the fiber. Then we also produce extracts where we're removing the fiber, and that's because we've got 8 kilos of dried mushrooms going into 1 kilo of final extract. So you can't put 8 kilos into one. So we will remove the fiber, but we will basically put that through a 2 to 3 time hot water extract, or maybe one of those extractions will be a final extraction with alcohol, which will remove out the final compounds, like for example, triterpenoids. They will come out with a water extract, but some will be difficult. So that's what we'll use the alcohol for. So certain of our mushroom species, we will use a water alcohol extraction, and others we will use just a straight water extraction. But when we're dealing with a concentrate, we'll extract them 2 to 3 times to make sure before we throw the fiber away that we have taken out all of the compounds in there that we're interested in.
So you're essentially buying these mushrooms. You're getting them from like kind of like your typical like kind of farming type of system. They're in the soil. People come out, they pull them out, or they're harvested, and then you grab them, and then you're extracting them with your processes. Is that the general way that you're pulling it versus the fruiting?
Well, look, here's what's going on. We contract with dozens or at least a dozen different farms.
Got it.
We've been working with these same farms for 20 years, producing mushrooms for us. And then my production partner in China will take those dried mushrooms and he will do the extraction. And, all of these farms are way back in the mountains. They're far away from
a lot of the pollution that can happen. That would go up and then fall back in the soil. So you're trying to stay away from the pollution element.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, look, you're in Texas. You know what it's like on the Gulf Coast in terms of all of those factories down there.
Yep.
I mean,
well, refineries and such.
Sure. Oh yeah, the last thing you'd want to do is eat vegetables that come out of the ground near one of those, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And look, let's face it, in the U.S., I think we probably pour more chemicals on our food crops than anybody in the world. I mean, it's just laden with chemicals. So when people say to me, "Oh, China," I'm like, look, we test every single batch.
That's key.
We test it for heavy metals, for pesticides. We do microbiological testing before it leaves. And then once it arrives in North America, we will test it again. So we test it. We can't sell unless it meets certain standards. And our products have been organically certified since 1996. That's when I took an organic certifier to China, and we had the first organic certification workshop for mushrooms in China, 1996.
Wow. So then they were able to certify it based on the farming practices. You're keeping it far enough away where you're not having a lot of the toxins in the air. That's great. Excellent.
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, we certify them over there with, right now we're using French certifiers. I mean, the German certifiers. So these are not like, who's certifying? Chinese certifiers, something. No, we've got European certifiers that can do this. And I've been working with my Chinese partners for 25 years. I mean, China produces 85% of the world's mushrooms. Think about that, 85%. And the issue is you cannot grow mushrooms for supplement use in the United States. It doesn't work. The economics are not there.
Yeah, no, I understand. That makes sense. So these are harvested. You get them shipped over here, and then you work on, does all your processing happen here or does it happen there?
Happens there. It all happens there.
So you do all your processing.
The beautiful thing about it is that everything in China is brand new. I'm telling you, look, the factory that it's being extracted in right now is 3 years old. Brand new, beautiful equipment. They have freeways over there, Justin, that just make you go, that's better than what we have. I ride around on bullet trains that go 300 kilometers an hour, and they're brand new, they're smooth, and it's a very modern, very high quality society over there. And what's interesting is you have that, but when you go out to the farms, they're still out there growing things in a very natural way. Whereas here in North America, we'd have warehouses with climate control of temperature, humidity, airflow. It would be all machinery and all the rest over there. No, it's very natural. The farms are shade cloth covered greenhouses, no air conditioning or anything like that. It's just basically grown during the particular season. Every year we have to tell them how many tons of dried mushrooms we need. Last year, Justin, we actually produced 320 tons of our mushroom extracts.
Wow,
320 tons of every single lot that we manufacture is 1 ton of that particular extract.
So a ton's 2,000 pounds, right? So that's 600
right.
pounds.
Well, these are metric tons too, 2,200 pounds, because it's like, 1,000 kilos.
Pounds at least.
Yeah. So it's a very large scale kind of operation, but we're dealing with a lot of small farms. And that's the beauty of it. We love our farmers. They're just wonderful, and they're so efficient at what they do. Not over here where everything is machines.
And that makes sense. So that's totally, I can wrap my head around that. Now, what should people be looking for on the label? Like, okay, we're going to put some links down below for some good resources, but what should someone be looking for if they're looking on the back of the label? Kind of break down how they should be looking at that label.
Well, the labels it should be like supplement facts.
Yeah.
And the first panel will tell you what is actually in this product. Okay, mushroom, 500 milligrams. And maybe they say reishi mushroom, 500 milligrams. Maybe they give the Latin name on it. Or maybe they say mycelium, X number of milligrams. In that particular part of the panel, that tells you what the main ingredient is. Now, if that is mushroom, it should be okay. Reishi mushroom extract, 500 milligrams, or reishi mycelium, 500 milligrams. And then in the other ingredients, that's where people will say, okay, I mean, a lot of capsules, they'll have different things they add to make the capsules, the product flow into capsules and things like that. But sometimes they'll put other ingredients in there, like, okay, what are the small ingredients that they might say? If you look in there, and in the other ingredients, it says myceliated rice, myceliated oats, or something like this, well, beware. And if it says, up there, fruiting body mushroom or fruiting body mycelium, something else like that, beware, because what they're doing basically is they're trying to obscure the fact that they're actually mostly grain starch.
Totally. Now, would it say hot water extract or alcohol extract on it if these were the ways it was processed?
Well, it depends. I mean, I think we've done that before on ours, but it's not something that is that you have to have on there in terms of the type of extract. That's the kind of stuff that in a lot of cases goes on the website or on any information about the product. But, a label only has so much territory on it. And when you look at the regulations that you have to look at in terms of that label, man, they're so strict to right down to the size of the font in certain cases. So there's only so much real estate there in terms of putting things on, whether it's hot water or some other kind of extract. You just normally should go to the site, and there they should have that kind of information for you.
But in general, you want to avoid the mycelium extract.
It's not even an extract. It's just a myceliated grain. It's not an extract.
And would it say myceliated grain? Is that what's going to say in the back of the label?
It would say that in the other ingredients.
Got it. Okay.
So look at. You know what that is? Just picture this for a second. Do you know what tempeh is?
Mm-hmm. To soy.
Okay. Do you know how it's
fermented soy?
Okay. What do they ferment it with?
I don't know.
They ferment it with a fungus. They ferment it with a fungus. So that is mycelium on that soybean. It's mycelium that ferments that soybean. So when you're eating tempeh, you're eating mycelium, fungal mycelium. That's what these people are producing, but they're drying it out, grinding it to a powder, and saying it's mushroom.
Okay. Now, people have to worry about taking mushrooms. It's a fungus. It's a medicinal mushroom. Is that correlated with the same kind of fungus that we see like with candida overgrowth or fungal overgrowth in our intestinal tracts? Is there a correlation with that?
No, absolutely none. And there's absolutely no scientific papers out there that have made any real experiments or references to that. I know herbalists that use mushrooms for candida infections. It's kind of like the whole doctrine of signatures, somehow like produces like or something like this. It's a very, a lot of people talked about that in the 90s, but it's been totally debunked.
Okay. And then what about, we're talking about what about mold though? Because obviously mushrooms, need that high moisture environment. Is there any worry about mushrooms being moldy in general?
Well, look, if you're buying fresh mushrooms and you see them on the shelf and you look at them and they look kind of ragged, or sometimes maybe there's a light fluff coming off them. Maybe at times there might be a mold on them. That would be unusual. Mold, generally, what you have to consider is that it is producing spores. And it's those spores that people breathe in. They breathe in those spores, and that's what creates this allergic reaction. Now, mycotoxin comes from, for example, you get a mold onto grain in the silos, and then that mold can produce aflatoxins. Yep. And that's something that grain producers are very aware of, and they're checking all the time. In fact, they run tests, same test that we run, which is ergosterol, because molds, they are a fungus. So, and that mold is basically mycelium. That's what the mold is. It's just mycelium. A mold does not produce a mushroom. A mold is just a classification of a mycelium organism. But that mycelium organism can, in fact, produce toxins. And so, grain producers in their silos and stuff in storage, they really have to be careful, because if there's any moisture in there, these molds could begin to grow. But look, I think what has to be very clear here is that what we breathe is an absolute soup of bacteria, of mold spores, of mushroom spores, of all sorts of microorganisms. We breathe those all the time. The key issue is don't be in an environment where there's a heavy amount of some particular spore, because that you can easily react to that. And one example of that is in a mushroom house, and you have a mushroom like an oyster mushroom that opens up, and the gills are exposed, and in that house they will be all of these spores in there. And if you're in there harvesting those spores for hours at a time, you're going to be breathing a lot of them. In fact, there's something that's called mushroom worker's lung, which is all about breathing spores. And that's where, most mold issues come from. Maybe you got a damp part in your bedroom or somewhere in your house, because the air circulation, the heat doesn't get back there. It takes moisture, the mold grows, it sporulates, just like on a piece of bread. And you see this sometimes you'll start and you'll see this little white mycelium, and the next thing you know, it turns green or black. Well, that's the spores that it's producing.
Oh, that makes sense. And so when the mushrooms are harvested, they transport it to like a low humidity type of storage container so they don't get moldy.
It goes right into a walk-in cooler.
Because I imagine you need this kind of moist environment, but if that moist environment were to stay after these mushrooms grow, that would eventually cause the mushrooms to get moldy.
That's
so you
right.
have to
it would
change that environment.
Absolutely. And look, when you're in a walk-in cooler, it's like a refrigerator. A refrigerator is actually a freeze dryer, a very slow freeze dryer, but that's what it is. You put something in the fridge. You want to dry something out. It's kind of interesting. Put something in there. Well, you've probably seen it before. You put something in, it's not covered up. Next thing you know, it's starting to dry out a little bit.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, I'd like to kind of frame this out. I'd like to go over your top 5 mushrooms and just kind of a bullet point or two for hey, this mushroom is great for this. Reishi, awesome for this. Boom, boom. And we'll go to the top 5. And then I'd love to end with kind of the psychedelic mushrooms that you are working on now. You're actually growing and harvesting some of these. I'd like to talk about your take on these and some of the benefits and where you see they're really useful. Sound good?
Sure, absolutely.
Good.
Well, look, everybody in the world knows about lion's mane now. Most popular mushroom in North America.
Yeah, I got patients asking me for it. Very good for cognitive benefits. Well, why don't we start with lion's mane? Go ahead.
Well, we will. Well, lion's mane actually has a compound in it that stimulates what's called nerve growth factor,
What's that compound? Do you know what the compound is?
Well, nerve growth factor, the specific compound there, they just call it NGF. I don't know exactly. What the compound name is.
That's in the mushroom? That's in
the mushroom. Well, no, sorry. No, it's not in the mushroom. The mushroom has compounds that
stimulate
that, and that in turn will work with the organization and sometimes even with the promotion of neurons and their growth. And so that ultimately can help our cognitive function. Sometimes some people are working with it and show some effects on early onset dementia, things like that. Well, look, in terms of nootropics, that's kind of where it fits in. And that's why all of a sudden it has become such a hot mushroom out there. I mean, look, Justin, 8 years ago, I sold about 100 kilos of our lion's mane. I think last year we sold at least 10 tons of it. That's it's our top seller right now. I mean, you can imagine. Okay, so
what's the active compound in the lion's mane that's driving that nerve growth factor? Do you know, is it a tritterpene or is it a 1,3-beta-glucan compound? Is it within that? What is it?
No, actually, there are compounds called haricinones. And there's also compounds called arenosines. Arenosines are a diterpenoid. The haricinones are, I'm not sure exactly what category they fit into, but they're the ones that are in the mushroom. The interesting part about it is that there's not a lot of them. They occur in very small amounts. So you really would have to take a reasonable amount. And that's something that I just want your listeners to understand. I know the label says take 2 capsules a day, but that's only because that bottle of 60 capsules gives you a month's supply, and they say take 2 of these. And normally, look, it's not enough oftentimes. So think about that when you're taking a supplement. The other one, cordyceps, is one that is used for fatigue and energy, and it was usually prescribed to people when it comes to traditional Chinese medicine, people who have had a long illness. They can't quite get over the last hump with that, and they're still kind of energyless and fatigued. They would prescribe cordyceps. Now over here, what do we do with that? Okay, we give it to athletes or something and hope for athletic performance. But if you're fatigued or feel like you have lower energy level, cordyceps is certainly a mushroom that could be used. There's a compound in there called cordycepin, which is also a anti-cancer compound as well. It's kind of interesting compound.
It bumps DHEA as well, right? We use it a lot in kind of functional medicine with adrenal issues. Or you mentioned kind of that long illness. There's a DHEA improvement, which is a sex hormone building block from the adrenals.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I haven't really focused much on that or read much about that, but I'm not a practitioner. You guys are using the things on the front lines and have understandings. Just like I'm not a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, but I do look at that in terms of what they're using these for. So that's what's important. That's how we identify which ones are the important functional mushrooms. We look at traditional Chinese medicine and say, okay, they're using reishi, for example. I had a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner at a reishi conference in China in the 90s say to me, reishi was his number 1 herb for the liver.
Yes, that's great.
And look, he gave 30 dried grams of mushrooms, which is a lot. That's a lot. That's a very high dose. And that's what I'm thinking, well, you know what? Over there, they want to see something happen. They're not going to give small amounts. They want to see some effect. I knew somebody that was in the extraction business in the United States, and he was producing liquid extracts. And he would always say, look, I want people to feel something. So his extracts were not a clear liquid. They were cloudy with all sorts of dissolved solids and stuff in there. So they were really strong extracts.
Wow.
So reishi, I guess, let's see, we've got cordyceps, reishi.
And then just real quick on the doses, right? Usually it's about 500 milligrams of mushroom extract about per capsule. Is it about like 1 to 3 grams, a good general recommendation?
Well, you know what I would say, and this is something that was published by a MD who also was raised in Hong Kong, knew a lot about TCM. He looked at all the literature and he said 2 to 5 dried grams or extract equivalent. So let's just say you go high and you go 5 grams. Well, if you have a 10-to-1 extract, that's 500 milligrams of that mushroom extract. So I go by that 2 to 5 dried grams of that mushroom or extract equivalent. And the 2 grams I would say is absolute minimum.
So when you do a hot water extract, right, is that going to be a 1-to-1 or is that going to be more concentrated typically?
Well, we do both. Again, with our 1-to-1, one of the things about the 1-to-1 is that what we've done is we've taken a mushroom powder, we've taken that fiber, we've broken it down with the extract, and we've pulled everything out of it to make it more bioavailable. That's, again, we would say 2 grams is the dose of that 1-to-1. So we're at the lower level with that one because we do sell the 1-to-1, and that's a product that we sell to other companies as well. So,
oh, very cool, excellent. So I'll let you continue to go. So you hit, I think you did the cordyceps was number 1. What else did we hit?
Well, we did cordyceps, reishi, lion's mane. When it comes to like other immune potentiators, I like shiitake and maitake. I think both of those. I mean, shiitake's got such a long body of research. They actually pulled a polysaccharide out of shiitake and called it lentinan, and it was a absolutely pure polysaccharide, pure beta glucan, and they sold it as a drug in Japan. Wow. Because, again, like over in the United States, something has to be pure before they would actually go ahead and allow it to be sold as a drug.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So it's interesting. They've actually taken and produced drugs from various mushrooms. But again, a drug product is different because a drug product, they're refining it down to one particular compound. We don't do that. We want to have a extract that's got as close to as possible to the profile of the dried mushroom itself. That's what we're looking for. When we extract, we don't try to build something up and throw other stuff away. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep the profile because, look, there are all sorts of things in these herbal products that can be part of the activity.
Totally. That makes sense. Anything else on the medicinal mushroom side you want to highlight? So we hit reishi, we hit cordyceps, we hit lion's mane, we hit shiitake and maitake. Anything else?
Well, turkey tail, certainly we can throw in there as another mushroom that has a lot of immunological potentiation activity. In Japan and China, they took turkey tail and they turned it into, turkey tail is Trametes versicolor. They turned it into, in Japan, they turned turkey tail into a drug product. They called it PSK. They had a lot of clinical research on it, which showed that it had activity for people having cancer treatment. So what they use an adjuvant for people undergoing chemo, radiation, whatever. So they used it alongside of that, and they found that ultimately it added 5 or 77% onto your lifespan after getting into this program. So
that was 5 to 7% extra. Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
And then what's the mushroom extract they use on like the cold sores and such? It's like,
wow, I'm not sure. I haven't heard a lot about that.
They use it. I think it's on the cold sores or on the HPV. They have it in a big supplement form. It's kind of like an abbreviation, kind of like PSK.
There's a number of those types of products that they make in Japan that are what I would call process driven. PSK, PSP, process driven products where they're growing out the mushroom or pure mycelium, then they're extracting it through a different process, sometimes proprietary, and they come up with a product, and that can be targeted to a specific ailment.
Okay, that makes sense. I'll pull it up here and I'll bring it up here in a second. Yeah, that's the versicolor, is the turkey tail. Excellent. Anything else you wanted to highlight on this medicinal mushroom side?
No, not really. I think we've covered a lot of territory here.
I love it. Excellent. Now let's talk about some of the psychedelics, by the way. I know you kind of got into that. You gotten the license, taken you a couple of years to get the license. Now you're growing that. Talk a little bit more about that process. How is it? Is it different than your typical medicinal mushroom process? Same with the extracts. And then what are the benefits of that?
Well, look, one of the things about psilocybin mushrooms, you've got many different species. Within one particular species of psilocybin mushroom, you can have that particular species harvested from different locations geographically. Now, the issue becomes each one of those geographical separated mushrooms, we would call a strain. So you have, let's say, Psilocybe cubensis, and then you have a strain from the Gulf Coast of Florida. You have a strain from Mexico. Each one of those will have a different profile of the active compound. So when you have that, how do you dose somebody? You can say, okay, yeah, we're going to give them 2 grams of this particular mushroom. Guess what? 2 grams from these different varieties or strains is going to have different amounts of the active compounds in there. And the interesting thing about that, Justin, is that there's research on lion's mane where they took 20 different lion's mane strains or cultivars, but most of these were wild lion's mane, and they measured them all for these active compounds. It went from 1 to 10%. Wow. Now think about that for a minute. So that means that the lion's mane, even that's being cultivated, depending on the particular strain, will have more or less of the active compounds. And that's one of the things we have to focus on, especially for our functional mushrooms, is making sure that our cultivar, and the one thing about cultivation that's so important is it's very much standardized. And so any herbal product you get, I mean, whatever herb it is, depending on where it's grown and the conditions and the particular, let's just say cultivar of it, if it's being cultivated, it can vary a lot. And that's why it's so important to be able to measure and to be able to do analysis of these. So in our psilocybin project, and it took us 1.5 years to get our license. So we are licensed to possess a controlled substance. And what we're doing is we cultivate these different species. If you have these things in there wild, the amount of the active compounds in there vary significantly. If a researcher is doing research with a psilocybin mushroom that comes from one place, and he does that research, and oh yeah, I've got some great data on it. You've got data on that one particular mushroom from that one location. You can't generalize from that. So this is one of the issues that's going on in terms of the psilocybin mushroom world. And even if you're going to take psilocybin, unless somebody says, oh yeah, I took 2 grams and I had a really strong experience, unless somebody does that, if you're just buying it from somewhere and they say, okay, and then you go, oh yeah, the normal dose is 2 grams, you take 2 grams, oh, I didn't feel anything. Well, that's possible. Or, oh my God, it was just a full-on, full-blown, what they call hero dose. And I had this experience where I just had to lay down and close my eyes, and I laid there for the next 4 hours. So that's what's so important. And what we're doing is we're not dealing with the main psilocybin mushroom that everybody works with, which is Psilocybe cubensis. We're looking at other major species, a lot of which, for example, in Mexico, they've been using down there in their shamanic healing practices. They've been using these species down there for hundreds, thousands of years. And then we're wanting to build a profile of those. And we do it by gathering these different strains from around the world. And then we grow them out, we analyze them, and then we come up with a cultivar that is stable and can produce a stable mushroom of that species. Now, at that point in time, a researcher can come to us and say, hey, I'm really interested in doing research on this species. Okay, we can say, okay, great, we've got it. Here's some material of it. And here is the analytical profile of this species. God, Justin, nothing annoys me more than reading research on functional mushrooms. And you look at, okay, what were you using? Oh yeah, we did a Ganoderma or reishi extract here. And you're like, that tells me nothing at all, because like I was mentioning, the reishi mushroom can have 1 to 10% triterpenoids. That can have a major effect on the outcome of what they're doing.
Totally. That makes sense. Now, I wanted to just back up a little bit. It's the AHCC, the active hexo. It's the active hexose correlated compound. I think that comes from a shiitake extract.
It does, and it's a process. It comes from a shiitake. What they do is they grow out the shiitake mycelium on, sometimes it's on sugarcane bagasse or something like this. Then they grow it out to a certain point. Then they'll extract it, and they'll maybe put it through a couple of extractions before they come up with the final product. So that's what I call a process-driven product. I mean, you can almost look at it like, okay, if I grow a mushroom out of a certain type of substrate, and then I give it certain conditions, so it's going to grow in a certain manner. That's kind of how those products work. It's the process itself. It's not just shiitake mushroom. It's not just shiitake mycelium. No, it's it's taking it through a number of steps like PSK, like PSP to come up with the final product.
And the steps are, is it going through an extract and they're doing it multiple times?
It is absolutely going through an extraction process. And, look, they have a process and they don't normally reveal it. They will just say, oh, in kind of general terms, how it's made, but they have a process for that. And that's why, again, it's a process driven product, much like PSK or PSP, which is a turkey tail product that was manufactured in China.
That makes sense. Now, also, that's good for HPV, so the human papillomavirus.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So, yeah, there's a lot of good data on that. So, there's a lot of good things that you can do to bump up your immune system using medicinal mushrooms. So that's
and shiitake is a great mushroom. And by the way, if you're going to eat any one mushroom, eat shiitake. Fabulous.
Yeah. Oh, love it. That's excellent. And you can get the same benefit just by eating the mushrooms. They don't have to be in an extract per se.
Well, you know what? You can get the same benefits. And look, when you're eating,
you probably need more though, right? You probably need
when you're eating a mushroom, you're not just going to eat 2 dried grams or something, because that would be like, one shiitake mushroom fresh mushroom might weigh 10 to 20 grams.
Right.
And that's not very much when you're eating. I would throw 100 grams into a fry pan and fry it out.
It's only a little over 3 ounces, not a lot.
Yeah. So really, that's what you want to do when you're eating mushrooms. You're eating more than that normal, because you're not digesting them. They're not pre-digested. You're having to digest them, and they're a little bit difficult. So that's where the supplements sort of come in. But eating mushrooms, you're going to get benefits. Absolutely.
That's great. Now, talk a little bit more about the benefits of psychedelic mushrooms. How are you dosing them? Now, you talked about kind of the hero's dose earlier. And what are some of the big benefits that you see out of the gate, whether it's processing trauma or enlightenment, creativity, anything that you see specifically, or maybe your own personal experience?
Well, look, I was growing them back in the 70s. So, we definitely have a lot of experience with them, as well as being in Mexico and eating them down in Mexico in the late 60s, early 70s. And that was kind of the period, right, where psilocybin mushrooms or LSD or those kind of things were available, and we used them. I think ultimately what's happening with these psychoactives, and I think probably the most positive thing, is they seem to work very well for addiction. People seem to be able to break their addiction with 1 or 2 major experiences with psilocybin. I think that is, can you imagine? You've got people that just can't get away from their addiction no matter what they try. It's a very, very difficult. So I think that's one of the major places where this is going to have a strong effect. The other thing they're talking about too is they're talking about depression, so certain mental health issues. So I think that will be, and that's that's the focus right now. They're looking at it medically. That's the focus. But personally, I think there's also, there's nothing wrong with using these recreationally if you do it properly and know what you're doing, and not do it, without thinking. And the other part of the experience, have you ever had psilocybin mushrooms?
I have not.
Okay. Well, look, one of the things that you also experience is ecstasy. I mean, look, I'm serious. It's ecstasy like you've never experienced it before. Maybe 100 times the highest experience you've ever had. And that ecstasy.
That's crazy.
That ecstasy is something that I think is tremendously healing, because every cell in your body is in an ecstatic state. That has to be very powerful healing modality. So that's something that you can experience on it. You obviously want to be kind of laying down and enjoying it and relaxed. So it's really important, but that's the other side of it. Most people don't talk about that so much, because they're, look, our society is based around, as medical. It's got to be something we can use in medicine some way.
Right.
So,
and, you have to treat some kind of disease, or we're not going to patent it. And it's put money in it.
And that's the thing I'm a little bit uncertain about that's going on out there, is there's just kind of this rush to monetize the whole thing. You're seeing these places are all of a sudden coming up out of nowhere that, oh yeah, we're going to give this. You can pay us thousands of dollars and you can come to our retreat. We'll give you a session or two. We've got people there that can help you through it. You better be careful with something like that, because who actually, this is one of the things that in Oregon, they've sort of doing it now. And okay, we're going to license people to be able to facilitate. What does that take? Oh, maybe you have to take a year-long course. Well, I don't know. Is that at the same time, I'm going, I don't want this to turn into psychiatry either, because that's where it's going as well. Psychiatry or some kind of psychologists and things like that. So I don't know. This is going into the classic medical model in North America. There may be some positivity out of there, maybe not. It's going to be taken over ultimately by the pharma industry. They're going to want to take these things. There's some talk about it, believe it or not, where they want to take the psychoactive out of these things. Just like, how they want to take the psychoactive side of cannabis out.
Right.
So you could have this, and CBD, I guess, is sort of like that, but it's like, you want to take the psychoactive out of it. That's why it has the benefits. It's the psychoactive end of it that has the benefits, but you want to take it out of there and create some other molecule that gives you a similar experience. It's just really unfortunate that that's the way the society is organized when it comes to the whole medical area.
Oh, no, I totally get that. That makes sense. Now, how does someone procure high quality mushrooms like this? And then what's the legality around it? I know you're up in Canada. How does that work from a legal standpoint? And then talk about dosing. I know people talk about microdosing, really small doses, maybe in a tincture, and then being able to kind of titrate up slowly with a liquid increment versus, eating a piece. What's the best way to dose? What's a good starting dose? And then let's talk about the legality in procuring.
Well, look, first of all, with my license, and I'm not selling it to anybody. If I sell it, it has to be to somebody else that has a license.
Okay.
It's a controlled substance, and so we're not looking at it as a business, so to speak.
So who are the people that have the licenses, and are they selling it to the mainstream public? Does it require a prescription? How does that look like?
Well, nobody with a license is selling it to the public. What you can do is you can sell it to a practitioner if the practitioner has a license, because he can then utilize it with his patients. So there are some companies out there that are doing that. We are not part of that. The funny thing is that in Vancouver, British Columbia, there's stores that will sell it right there.
Oh, wow. So you don't have to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist to get that license. Just regular run-of-the-mill commercial.
Well, no. They're doing it illegally, but they're.
Oh, got it.
It's a store. It's a store.
Got it. It's
now,
not legal.
Look, there are states like Oregon where they have legalized it to some degree, and if you get the license from them to sell it or to use it in a practice, okay, Oregon's sort of there. I was just at a psychedelic psychedelic science conference in Denver, Colorado. They've legalized mushrooms there. And at this conference, they had a trade show. There were people, who had booze, and they had bags with substrate and these psilocybin mushrooms growing out of the bags. You could buy one of those right there and take it home with you.
Wow.
So there are areas, but I think Oakland has something like that going on too. So, but look, it's going to be a slow process, and it's not going to, there are certain states that are leading the way, much like what happened with cannabis.
Is there a way to get it legally here in the States? Can you see a practitioner of some sort? Who would be the best way to get it legally?
Well, you know what? Yeah, you'd have to go through a practitioner but maybe not. Maybe in Oregon, I don't know, or maybe in Denver, maybe you can just buy it from somebody.
So it depends on the states. So it's
state
specific.
Really depends on the state. It is otherwise illegal in the U.S. It's illegal in Canada. But look, there's always people pushing the limit, and that's how things change.
Okay. And then talk about the dosing. So do you recommend starting off with kind of a microdose in a tincture form and then kind of going up? How do you recommend starting that? Well, if someone hypothetically were to do it, let's say based on your experience that you've done specifically. I know you're not talking about treating people, or this is just kind of your experience.
I do not treat people or make any claims.
Correct.
But look, there's a whole thing about microdosing going on out there
Yeah.
where people are taking very small amounts of it, and like maybe 100 milligrams of mushroom powder. That's way below threshold. The idea is that if you take that on a regular basis, that somehow it will help with what's considered to be neurogenesis, where it will help to stimulate regeneration of nerve cells and so on, and maybe create some ongoing positive effects for you in your life. Whether it does or not, nobody really knows right now. Any studies that they've done are nothing more than sending out questionnaires to people, and it doesn't have anything to do with a standardized dose that people are getting or where they're getting it. It's just their experiences. And so some people say, oh, yeah, they're getting benefits. Other people say, no, I don't really feel much of anything. In terms of other dosing, like to get more of the actual experience, you're probably going to have to take at least a gram of dried psilocybe cubensis, which is the standard mushroom that's out there in commerce. There's, you can get it anywhere if you know the right people. I mean, it's being there's thousands of tons of that mushroom being produced in the world today. I mean, it's everywhere. So if you really want to get it, you can probably find it, and really better off talking to friends who know it, and then it's like I was saying, you never know exactly how strong it is unless somebody that says, hey, I took it and this is how much was really strong or not strong or something. But you'd be taking 1 gram of dried mushroom would be kind of like the minimum that you would probably take to have some type of effect from it.
Okay, cool. And this is going out worldwide. So every different area, different states, different regions, territories are going to have different laws. So follow your laws. I don't want to tell anyone to break the law. We're just trying to inform and educate the public here.
That's right.
Anything else, Jeff, you want to leave the listeners with in regards to information on the psychedelic mushroom portion of the show?
Well, I guess I would say that I think that the end of prohibition, if that's what's happening, is very important. And it's a very positive step, just like the end of cannabis prohibition. Cannabis is now legal in Canada. It's legal in certain states of the United States. I mean, look, I used to smoke cannabis years ago, especially in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I used to smoke it all the time. It was prohibited. I was breaking the law. Now that it's legal, I haven't smoked for quite a while, so it's kind of like that doesn't help me a whole lot.
Right.
But I'm happy that prohibition is over because it's destroyed a lot of lives. It's sent a lot of people to jail. It never should have been prohibited in the first place. It was just a backlash against the cultural revolution of the 60s and 70s. The fact that now they're loosening up the regulations around psilocybin mushrooms, I think that's a wonderful thing. I hope it carries forward. What we really need is just education on how to use these things. And we'll get that. A lot of people out there are speaking about it, and they're talking about it, and they're talking about set and setting, which are very important when you take these things. And, you have to treat them with respect. That's the key. Just respect them, and ultimately you could have a positive experience with them.
Well, Jeff, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I mean, I love the fact that you're on the cutting edge, bringing medicinal mushrooms and their benefits to the forefront. They've been around forever, but people in the functional medicine, natural medicine field have had these in their toolbox for a while. So I love the general public's getting onto it. Just your experience with the lion's mane, the amount that you used to sell versus how much you sell. It's crazy. And then, I think there's some really interesting benefits with some of these psychedelic mushrooms, especially with addictions and especially with like processing various trauma. So I think there's some really good tools that these things could hold, especially if you have the right practitioner and the right training, and you're customizing these doses to that person and you have good observation. I think there's some good healing that these things can tap into. Anything else you want to leave the listener with?
I guess the only other thing I say is eat mushrooms, put mushrooms into your diet. They're really the forgotten food and the missing dietary link. Mushrooms are great food. People who eat a lot of mushrooms live longer. So put mushrooms into your diet.
Great. Well, I'll leave Jeff's sites in the description here, Nammex, NAMMEX.com. And then we have realmushrooms.com. We'll put the links in the description. So if you're driving or working out, feel free to click on those later. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's excellent.
Justin, thanks a lot for having me. I really had a great talking to you as always.
Thanks so much, Jeff. You take care.
You too.
Bye.
See ya.